Oha. Haumi Takuyapi. Elijah Hopkins Demie. Dayanya Hipidom Takipi. I want to welcome all of the folks that are listening to our land-based learning podcast series. Thank you for joining us today. It is Wednesday, December 10th, here at Fort Peck Community College. And today is a special day because we have a special guest that I've asked to share a little bit with us about his experience with land-based learning. We have a author-presenter that's all the way from Bemidji, Leech Lake Reservation in Minnesota, Dr. Anton Treuer, acclaimed author, very knowledgeable in land and language and all those spaces and for education. And so I reached out to him about a month or two ago. I've already read some of his books, The Language Warrior Manifesto, a few of his other books. So tonight at 6 o'clock in our auditorium, it's going to be an in-person presentation, and we'll also have some online Zoom option for individuals that want to check that out. But Anton is cool enough to where I asked him if he would maybe share a little bit with us about, his, ideas, anything he wants to share around land-based education. And so we also have, maybe I'll let them introduce themselves, but Cole Baker, maybe a brief introduction about maybe who you are, and maybe as much as you want to share about where you're from, that would be good. And then we can kind of just get right into maybe some questions. If you have some questions, Cole, and I'll definitely have some questions for Antoine. But yeah, maybe we'll just take it from there. Maybe introduce yourself, Tahanshi, to those that are listening.
Ahau miigwech. Thanks for listening today, everybody. Wagosh indigu minawa megazi and dodem. Wasawadi wishkonigan wainjabayan gazagasquaji mekag. I'm excited for the conversation today. My native name is Wagosh, which means fox. I come from the Eagle clan, and in our tribe, we have a clan system where there's either a four-legged animal, a bird, or a fish, and it doubles as a symbol for your family, as well as a spiritual guide of sorts. I'm from the Eagle clan, come from Leech Lake, and excited for the conversation. Thanks for having me.
I'm Takuyapi. Cole Baker. I'm Elijah's assistant, I guess, over here at the college. I just started a couple months ago. First time podcaster, so.
Okay.
All right. But yeah, no, I'm just here to learn. If I have some questions come up, I'll definitely jump in. But yeah, excited to be here.
So I guess maybe we'll, Antoine, if you could maybe share a little bit about anything you want to share, really, like a high level macro view about your experience with land-based education, maybe things that you've done in maybe your early years, and maybe in your professional space, what that might look like. I know you're expert with, or we say maybe in professional spaces, expert, but you're knowledgeable around like language, and so all that stuff's connected. Taku ota ikoyake, like with the land, the language, it's all like intertwined. But yeah, and anything you want to share, we would appreciate that.
Oh, sure. I think first of all, pretty much any human you speak to from any culture would say that they have the same wish, which is they want their kids to have a long, healthy, happy life. And there might be an exception or two out there, but for the most part, I think that's what people want. They might disagree about what they think their kids need to have a long, healthy, happy life. But I've been thinking about this from my own life and the work that I do around our language and culture. And I also do lots of reading. I probably read 50 books a year, a lot of them on Audible because driving's a permanent condition in my part of the world. But the scientists and some of the other thinkers are just starting to catch up to the wisdom that our ancestors have carried for many, many years about the importance of and the value of relational health And by that, I mean, it matters if you have healthy relationships with your friends and family members, but also the kind of relationship that we have with the land itself and all of the things that depend upon this earth. And this is something that our elders and our culture carriers have spoken to well for a long time. I think really if you go back 10,000 years ago, which is not that long in the history of humans, all of us on planet Earth had earth-based worldviews, lived in villages, harvested food together, worked cooperatively, and had a relationship with the land and the animals and the birds and the fish and things like that. It's been the development since the dawn of the agricultural age and the birth of cities and so forth that have had people increasingly disconnected from that. And I can give some examples maybe of some of the things we do that might speak to this. But we have a custom in our family when a new baby's coming into the world that we actually have a medicine that we use, and we put it right in the birthing go bag if a family's going to a hospital as opposed to doing a home birth. And in Ojibwe, we call the medicine Namewashk. And so probably very similar to a lot of the Great Lakes, other Great Lakes and Plains tribes, we make an offering when we harvest a plant, whether that's for food, medicine, shelter, anything else. And it's kind of spiritually empowered for that purpose when we do so. And so when we go into the hospital then, and my kids were actually born in hospitals rather than at home, although a lot of families increasingly are using home births or, even indigenous culture-based like birthing lodges and things like that. One of my daughters is working to build exactly that in our community. And I think those are really worthwhile efforts because those colonial systems don't always nurture our people and look out for them the way that they should. But when we would go into the hospital and the baby comes into the world, we'll actually take some hot water out of the tea dispenser right in the hospital there, steep that medicine in there and turn it into a tea, strain it when it's bath temperature. We actually use that medicine for the baby's first bath, and it strengthens their constitution and their hold on life. And I got to do that ceremony right in the hospital instead of like the nurse wiping the vernix off and doing the bath and giving them Johnson's baby products right away. Using that medicine serve multiple purposes. So there's a medicinal one, there's a spiritual one, but also in this day and age when we have lots of parents checked out from parenting their own kids, it automatically has you get to know your kid. You see where their birthmarks are, if your baby has hair on her butt or whatever, and you fall in love with your kid. And when you fall in love with your kid, you are highly motivated to figure out whatever they need to deal with the fevers, the puke, the up all nights, the ornery teenagers, whatever comes your way. And so there is something in the establishment of relationship to the land, relationship between child and parent, the use of medicine. Some families will also take some moss with them into the hospital, and as soon as the baby's born, touch them on the moss and then hand them to their mother, and it's like bonding them with the earth and then with their mother for their first teaching, nursing, and things like that. And so I think some of those practices are really powerful. We also take the placenta and afterbirth when a baby's born. We'll bring it home, and it can go in the freezer for a couple days, but then it gets buried in the forest next to a maple tree. And for us, the maple tree is like the tree of life. And there are legends that explain why. But it is so cool in the springtime when we open up our maple sugar bush to harvest the sap, which we cook down into syrup and sugar and things like that. And all of my kids are there making offerings at the tree of life to get food out of the tree where their placentas are buried. And I feel so dang connected to those trees, that particular part of the woods, to my children and to my grandchildren, to my parents and to my grandparents. And it is beautiful. And when I think about like preparing my children and sending them out into this world with a decent chance at a long, healthy, happy life. My kids know the science of how do you get food out of a tree, but they also know the culture of how and why you get food out of a tree. And they just walk around even as little kids and they're like, I can do stuff. And the I can do stuff attitude translates into their ability to deal with anything the world throws at them, from homework to navigating friendships to whatever kinds of adversity come their way. And so I feel like the stuff that's in our cultural toolbox, so to speak, with regard to our connection to Mother Earth, our relationship with the land, and all of the things that, derive their life from it. I think that stuff equips them for health, success, and a decent shot at longevity. And, there are many other contributions that our cultural practices make. It's not just a heady ceremony. It's just the everyday things that we do. And these things pay tremendous dividends. Among the hats I wear, I do a lot of research, and I do that with our elders. So I record their stories, translate, transcribe, that kind of stuff. And I've done a lot of my learning from the people that I think of as a PhD in our own way, even though, they don't all have the colonial credentials, but they're the smartest people I know. And it is amazing to me how many of our people had remarkably long lives. Now, one of the elders that I spent a lot of time with, the late Archie Mose, was born in 1901, and he was 12 years old the first time he ever saw a white man. That was an American experience, by the way. And he was in his 30s first time he saw a car, or a black man for that matter. And when I met him, he was in a little modern house watching WWF SmackDown on a TV and laughing really loud, like he must have seen big changes in his lifetime. But he had a remarkably long life. And it was not just about eat right and exercise, although eating right and exercise matter, but he had a very healthy web of relationships with the people in his family, the people in our ceremony circles. And in spite of all the colonial crap that our people have had to wade through, I think he demonstrated the dividends that are derived from that for our people when we embrace our culture and our life ways.
Yeah, no, appreciate you sharing that. There's been some concepts, maybe you could share your insights on. When I listen, I try to listen to other or read content or materials from other different tribes, and trying to get outside of my own ethnocentric worldview a little bit, expand and discuss with different elders and people that have understandings of different cultures. But because one of my dekshis, he would say, we're all wahunumpa, we're all two-legged people. We're all ikchewichashta, like just common people. And so all indigenous people are that way. And so sometimes I hear these terms, like one of them is, we are the seventh generation. I've heard that term. And some people, I think there's a little bit of confusion on what it might mean for some people. Whereas I think that, like, for example, I've heard this term like the eighth generation, and I think I understand what they're trying to say, but I also think it's rooted in maybe not having a deeper understanding of what the seventh generation. It's like a concept, and so maybe if you could share a little insight on that, because I think Anishinaabe people, I've heard a number of individuals share that information or that concept as a cultural concept in a teaching. Maybe if you could share a little bit about that would be good.
Sure. There's kind of layers of it for me. One, there is kind of a series of prophecies that speak to 7 major fires that foretold of the coming of strange people from across the water, times of hardship, loss, and rebuilding. So one of the frames that I've heard with regard to seventh generation is that we're the generation that is coming out of this and rebuilding and things like that. And some people have invoked like an 8th generation, like we're coming through the 7th fire and we're now into something new. And some people have used it as a way to ask, what will that be? And use it as a call to action. Mm-hmm. But there's another layer to this, and that to me is a little more deeply embedded just in our own language. So in Ojibwe, there's a word we have, anakobijigun, and we use that word both for my great-grandparent and also for my great-grandchild. And that does span 7 generations, from great-grandparent to grandparent, to parent, to myself, that's 4, and then my child, my grandchild, my great-grandchild. So it spans 7 generations. The word literally means my line. And so the way we think of that is 7 generations ago, our people were really kind of having a hard time. They were dealing with treaties and residential boarding schools and all kinds of really awful policies that were just disempowering, painful, and were literally killing people physically and culturally. And they were thinking, what are we going to need today, 7 generations away from them, when no one will remember their names? And they thought we would need land, we would need clean water, we would need our language, our culture, and each other. And in spite of all the things that happen, here we are, and we still have those things. When I think 7 generations from now, no one's going to know my name, and it honestly doesn't matter how many books I write. What are they going to need when they don't know my name, and it is not about me at all? And I think they're going to need the same things. So what can I do today that can positively impact the chances that the people who won't know my name will still have land, clean water, our language, our culture, and each other? And then if I bend my efforts towards making that possible, all my strivings are worth it. It becomes a little bit easier to decide about, do we put in the new oil well or the pipeline or not? Do we put in the mine or not? But it's not just on those types of decisions. It's easier to make a decision about how we spend our time and our life. And I mean, I don't know about you, I still struggle to make all the right decisions or to change, my negative behavior patterns. Could be about anything from cell phone use to, my weaknesses for certain types of food, sugar, but so it doesn't mean that change is always easy. But if you take the long view, if you think in terms of 7 generations, it is easier to align what we're doing today with the values that we say we want to live by. If we don't do that and we take short-term thinking, then people are thinking of the next quarterly shareholder profit statement, or we're making decisions based on emotional reactivity. And usually that's when stuff goes really sideways. So to me, that 7 generations frame is something that's just helpful for thinking about life, legacy, and how we can devote our sacred time to the things that really matter the most.
And then, earlier we were having some lunch, we were visiting, and my wife made some wicked soup, man. So it was good. Yeah, it's really good. But one of the questions that I kind of threw out there, maybe you could share a little bit, put out there, because I know when I was reading one of your books, The Language Warrior Manifesto, you talked about like through your own cultural grounding and some of the elders that you worked with. I don't think you were necessarily looking for it. It just kind of found you. Maybe it's kind of like one of your callings was your connection to the culture, and specifically through the sacred dance. And so maybe if whatever, I know certain things can be shared, certain things it's not appropriate, but like I've always been curious to learn more about it, because our people have that ceremony too, you know, and I've heard that other tribes even farther down south at one point had it, but through change, through colonization, all those different things, some of those ceremonies were kind of lost. And so, and it's my understanding that you have a deeper understanding of that ceremony and kind of what it represents, and it's all connected to the land and how we were supposed to live our life. But maybe if you could share a little bit about that, you know, I think that would be really educational and helpful.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you know, first of all, on like an individual level, other people may look at this a little differently, but I think we are influenced by many different things. So we are influenced by good and bad luck. We are lucky enough where we got to eat that soup today for lunch. And today there are a bunch of people in this world who are starving, and it's not because of their bad morals or lack of a work ethic. That's because they were born into and are living in a different part of the world. That's just good luck or bad luck. We're also deeply impacted by the decisions we make. Sometimes if we're driving 100 miles an hour and have a bad experience, well, that's a choice we made. And we're also impacted by the Great Spirit's plan for all of us. And it's those three things, like three strands of a braid, that really affect our trajectory. We don't have much control over good and bad luck. We have some control over good and bad choices, so try to make the best ones we can. And when we spiritually listen, and we have opportunities to do this, like when we go fasting, when we have dreams, we can sometimes get a little glimpse of the plan that the Great Spirit might have in store for us. And when we move towards alignment with that, usually we'll see the best results. So in my own life, I try to do that, stumbling, bumbling, rumbling, imperfect human that I am. And the better I do at that, the better things go. With regard to this question about the Wakan dance of the Dakota, you know, this is a ceremony that was probably one of the very most important ceremonies for Dakota people when they were living in the woodlands. And there are linguistic and cultural cousins of the Dakota, the Ho-Chunk, who are part of the same language family, even though the Ho-Chungra, the Ho-Chunk language, and Dakota are distinct and different languages, would not be mutually intelligible. At the same time, there are many similarities and parallels between those languages. And they may be a good example because they still have their medicine dance, and they also have a clan system. And these are things that were an important part of Dakota culture when French fur traders encountered them, when early British and American missionaries showed up in Dakota communities, and they described these ceremonies, but did not describe a Sundance. So there's no doubt that it was an important part of the Dakota culture. The reasons, process, and timing for the loss of the Wakan dance amongst the Dakota are not simply attributable to missionaries and colonization and residential boarding schools. I think sometimes there's a tendency that us modern natives have to think of anything changing as only happening because someone's taking something away. And I think you have a combination of factors. It is true, residential boarding schools were horrible and did tremendous damage to our languages and cultures. It's also true that, you know, missionaries and the introduction of a whole variety of faith traditions amongst us also had impacts, and lots of other things too. But in addition to that, you know, the Dakota, Nakota, Lakota people were really from one group expanding and somewhat separating from one another. And of course, the Assiniboine and Nakota split as well and ended up on independent historical trajectories, even though there's this language commonality between them, and lots of other historical developments. But as all of those tribes are moving out of the woodlands and onto the prairies, well, then lots of other cultural adaptations happened too, where all of the early descriptions of the Eastern Dakota are farming primarily, and occasionally taking trips to go hunt buffalo or things like that. It shifts as people move into North and South Dakota and Montana, as far as what people are using for primary food supplies. And the same thing with use of the horse, and the same thing with ceremonies, as the Sundance, which is something, I mean, I wouldn't even pretend to be able to tell you exactly what tribe truly originated that ceremony on the plains, but it was shared amongst many. I've heard Kiowa people say it started with us, and I've heard other tribes say it started with us. That debate doesn't even need to be settled, and I would not be the person to settle it. But it is something that was shared amongst different tribes. Even when Ojibwe people moved onto the plains to Turtle Mountain, they picked up a Sundance, although they called it a thirsting dance. And Ojibwe people who moved into Manitoba picked it up too. That didn't mean they're no longer Ojibwe, they're no longer Anishinaabe. It just meant that they were shifting and changing culturally in response to the broader culture around them and to the different, foods that they would be using as primary food things. So, I don't view, it's just a long way of saying, I don't view the loss of the Wakandans as meaning the Dakota are less than, but it was part of the an inflection point, part of cultural change, whether it's good, bad, neutral, or whatever. That's for Dakota people to decide. And whether that's something people want to learn about or, try to bring back or whatever is also for Dakota people to decide. And I don't think there's one right answer to a question like that. But it is part of the cultural tapestry that Dakota people had inherited and that their ancestors believed in and practiced. And there are many other things too. In an Ojibwe cultural context, there's been a lot of exchange between tribes, and among them, the Dakota gifted the Ojibwe a ceremonial drum. And in English, we often call it a big drum. And we still carry that ceremony to this day. We sing the songs with Dakota words in there. And it was, among other things, a peace offering to establish permanent and lasting peace between the tribes. And so we honor that gift. And anytime Dakota people show up at that Ojibwe ceremony, they are treated with the highest regard and respect and lavish with gifts and things like that. And that ceremony really was, given from the Dakota to the Ojibwe in the middle of the 1800s. It was probably our most recent major ceremonial acquisition. And it's an important part of Ojibwe culture today. So just because it's newer doesn't mean that it's not important. I mean, it's an extremely important part of our culture today.
Appreciate you sharing that. Tashi Cole, do you have any questions? Are you good?
I guess my only question would be right now. So, I'm not native, Nakota, Dakota, Lakota, yeah, Mie, Gisuna, Wasichu, Asian and Caucasian. But, I was recently married this summer and I got a daughter and a son on the way, and they're all enrolled, Assiniboine and Sioux. So my question is, what's the appropriateness of me learning the language, the culture, customs, maybe some ceremonies to be able to share and pass that down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most people you meet, including most indigenous people, when you start really probing into their background, you're going to get some kind of mathematical equation. I'm part of this tribe, I'm part of that tribe, and my grandma was actually part of this other tribe, and also lots of other things too. I think even in my own personal life, I also am multiracial. I guess you'd say I'm fairly brown, but sometimes a little racially ambiguous. People are like, is he Native? Is he Hispanic? Is he Filipino? Is he Arab? They can't quite tell by looking at me. I mean, braids and beads, and they're like, okay, or where I show or when I start talking maybe. But it's been a lifelong journey, and I think healthy to arrive at the position where you can just own and love all the parts about who we are. I love my white dad. He's a wonderful human. He gave me so much. He showed me what unconditional love looks like. That is a gift I try to give to my children every day. I'm not less than because I'm a half-breed, you know? And I think sometimes some of our people are trying to like out-Indian one another, and it can be kind of mean and harsh out there. Most of us are going to have a grandkid who doesn't look the stereotypical part. We should demonstrate what it looks like to love all the parts of who we are, and to teach our kids to love all the parts of who they are, and keep that stuff going. This is how we break the intergenerational toxic transmission of lateral violence and show them what love looks like. At the same time, I think most of us are going to be in mixed company. Even if you are a bona fide full blood, are going to be in mixed company for a lot of our lives. And if the only definition of authentic indigeneity is 100% biologically indigenous, full blood, speaks the language, lives in the community, like even the Amish can't stay Amish and wall themselves off from the world and freeze their language and culture in time. So I think we want our languages, histories, cultural understandings to be widely understood and shared between peoples. And Native people helped make America what it is, from building the Twin Towers and all the other skyscrapers in the New York City metro, Native people doing that, to Eli Parker and serving as adjutant general in the to Ulysses S. Grant in the Civil War and taking Lee's surrender at the end of the Civil War, to Iroquois ideas about many different tribes being united in a common political entity, the story of the Iroquois Confederacy, the Haudenosaunee peoples, which was studied by America's founding fathers and came up with the idea of many independent states, part of a united common nation, to the deeper things about our languages, our cultures, our ways of doing things and looking at the world. So I know my non-native father would show up at cultural and community events. There were some things he could not do, such as be initiated into some of our sacred societies. But there were many things he could do. So he was out there with the rest of us, hunting, fishing, making maple syrup and sugar. And it would be abnormal to exclude anyone in the family tapestry from any kind of activity like that. He did a lot to teach me about hunting, even though my parents gave tobacco to one of our elders to officiate at my first kill feast when I first became a successful harvester. So he was supporting the culture, and we would want him to do that. So, my youngest daughter's in gymnastics. It's not like only people who were gymnasts can support her on her journey. No, everybody who loves her supports her on her journey, whether they know about gymnastics or not. Right? And so I think it's like that with our basic cultural practices and things like that. And I think we'd all benefit from we're humans. We need to practice humanity. Let's be kind to one another, loving of one another, supportive of one another. Most people will at least espouse these values, and we sometimes struggle to live by them. So we need the reminders, and we need to hold each other accountable. Hey, we're all here for this kid. We're all here for these things. And honestly, like, I mean, you know what this is like because you're in a marriage, both of you, like you support your partner, not just the things you want them to do. That'd be a recipe for a really unhappy marriage. You support the things that they want to do. And they may come up with some radically different ideas. Honestly, it's part of what makes a marriage work is that you both have totally different ideas or passions or things. And so we support and hold one another's things up. So I don't think I could have been married to somebody who did not support, the cultural identity development of my kids. So I would say it's part of your mission and you have every right and you owe it to your kids. So you just keep on going.
All right. Panamia. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's good to hear. It's really good advice. I think anytime we can have our children hear language, like I think it's really cool that you're picking up a Nakota language, and now I even hear you using a little Dakota. Heck, yeah, man, that's good. That's really good. But yeah, I think a lot of us, like you're saying, I'd agree. Definitely. I know a very few like true full bloods around anymore. A lot of us, are mixed, different tribes, different cultures for sure. We're
all indigenous to somewhere, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like I've had a lot of conversations with people about that. Like if you go back in our origins, at some point, we were all like very like hunter gatherer people. It's just different times in our lives. But one of the questions I didn't get a chance to visit with you earlier about was I'm always like really intrigued with languages, because languages, like we talked about a little bit earlier, are grounded in the land itself. So for example, if I heard the story of the Dakota, the farther west we went, some of our dialects started to change, right? And so one theory is that I heard from a Lakota speaker, not myself, but they had thought that it became easier to use the L dialect the farther west they went because they weren't in the plains. It was harder to get to reach out, and so they had to. And so it was easier to use L's in everyday speech. First time I heard that, I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but like I thought that was interesting. And so when you think about a lot of our stories, like for example, one of the our Ohunkaka stories was and I thought it was just maybe for Assiniboines. Then I heard the Dakota similar story of where a muskrat, all these animals, they go down and this muskrat pulls up this dirt from the bottom of the earth, and then, but as I've learned and met other people from other tribes, that's kind of like a shared. They might have like slightly different take on that, but it's. A lot of tribes have a similar cultural origin story. I thought that was really interesting. So the language is probably evolved. And so like with Anishinaabe language, to what extent is it mutually intelligible with Cree would be one question I had. But those other similar tribes, like was it Oneida? To what extent, or Ottawa, can you as an Anishinaabe speaker understand them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so first of all languages change over time. They always are. When I was in high school, they actually made us read this dude called Geoffrey Chaucer. I think they probably gave up on him by now, but he was one of the first people to ever write something down in English. And I could barely read that. Oh ye, oh yay, weird spellings. And he was writing only 600 years ago. And English is a language that is widely spoken and well understood, across much of the world. So in only 600 years, that language changed that much. And even since then, English sounds a little different in New Zealand, Australia, the United States, and even in different parts of England and Scotland. So languages are always going to shift and change, and it's just normal for that to happen. And that doesn't mean that they are, diminished through the process of change. However, like when you look at Ojibwe, we're part of what's called the Algonquian language family. And usually all of the languages in a language family have some sort of shared linguistic history and even, of course, other types of history too, like the Romance languages, French, Spanish, and so forth, were all places colonized by Rome. But in the Algonquian language family, it's one of the biggest ones. There are 29 different tribes, and some tribes are pretty closely related. So as a speaker of Anishinaabemowin or Ojibwe, I can understand Odawa speakers pretty well. And you'll hear some differences. Like we would say, Onijishin, Ngichiminwendam Wabamanan. Like, it's good, I'm happy to see you. And for them, instead of Onijishin, they say Nishin. Nichiminwendam. So it's a little faster, depleting certain vowel sounds. When you first hear that, it can be like, whoa, what did I just hear? But when you acclimate to that, you can kind of hear kind of what's missing, so to speak. And I would say Ojibwe and Odawa are fairly close structure-wise, pronunciation-wise, although there are marked differences. Cree, there are a number of different dialects of Cree, so some are a little bit closer. There are actually some mixed Ojibwe Cree communities in Ontario, and even nearby here in Montana, you will have communities that are populated, like Rocky Boy, predominantly Cree, but some Ojibwe folks, and there was some independent language usage and some mixing, he's had the same thing at Turtle Mountain, North Dakota. So, yeah, I would say there's quite a bit of mutual intelligibility, but when you look at some of the other languages, like Delaware, for example, they call the Lenni Lenape, they have an L in Delaware. We don't even have that sound in Ojibwe. And the words Lenni Lenape are really the word Anishinaabe. Using an L where we'd use an N, you can hear it, Anishinaabe, Lenni Lenape. Yeah, it's a little more than a dialect variation, but you can still see and hear the structural similarities that these come from the same mother group. And, the linguists are kind of interesting too, where there's a little bit of a science to studying how languages shift and change. So our ancestors, some thousands of years ago, probably had a lot more TH sounds, and maybe it sounded like they were spitting a lot from the descriptions, because what we have now are a lot of what are called labials, where a lot of sounds are towards the front of your mouth. So gikawaba mininim, and a lot of things are up at the front of your teeth and your lips. And those sounds indicate, an evolution from, kind of sounds being very common in the language. And I think you have something very different with Dakota, where you might hear some more guttural sounds and things like that. And so they're just independent pathways by which languages shift and evolve. And any group of humans that get separated, they're gonna keep shifting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there was a couple years ago, I really started taking more of an interest in Wiutapi, sign talk, playing sign talk. And depending upon who you talk to, there's like little different variances, but there's plain sign talk, and then I'm not sure if there was a version of it farther to the west and or east of the Plains region. I know I posted a video. My father is from the Fort Belknap community. He was born there, and then there was I got a hold of some material because I thought Wiutapi, speaking with the hands, sign talk, was a way to reinforce language learning. That was how I approached it. Actually speaking Nakota or Dakota, but now hardly none of these communities in like the Plains, very few, with the exception of a couple hand speakers in Blackfeet that I'm aware of, and that was just because a few of them, I think when they were younger, they were like deaf, and so they learned they learned that from the elders. but very few there. There's some in Crow, a few in Northern Cheyenne is my understanding, but I've asked around North Dakota, South Dakota, some of the Dakota communities in Minnesota, in Canada. At least if there are any, I'm just unaware of it. But I was able to get, like I said, some of these videos from there was an old CD-ROM I found when I first started working at Fort Pitt Community College in the tribal library. There was a CD-ROM. It was called Wiutapi Speaking with the Hands. Brenda Farnell, I think, was the author, but it was her dissertation work. She published this book. In fact, I have a copy of it over there. But there was a CD-ROM in it, and so I didn't. Who has a CD-ROM, right? It's like 2025, but like
I remember when that was cutting edge stuff.
Cutting edge, yeah. I remember that when I was in high school. I remember that was like a thing or whatever. But at the time, this was like in 2014, I started working here. So I took that CD-ROM and I had a MacBook and I put it in the DVD player, and here it kind of worked. And so I was like, oh, cool. And so it was weird, but it would play like little weird pieces. It's like I would find these little files, and so I got a clip, like a minute 30-second clip of this Kushi from Fort Belknap, fluent elder, and this was recorded like the 80s, maybe early 90s. But she was old back then. She was telling a story about the seven sisters and her, I forget how it was, but it's like something about I could understand some of the language, a little bit of the language, but it was really out of context because it recorded like right in the middle of this speech. But the point of this recording was to reinforce how the Wiutapi, speaking with the hands, reinforce speaking with the language. And I always thought that was like super interesting. And so there was another video that was recorded in the 1930s. I forget the name of the Army general, but he was like a retired general, and he recorded several speakers. And one of them, but there was an individual from Poplar, Fort Belknap. I think every tribe in Montana was represented, even some across the Rocky Mountains, but Flatheads. And some of these like tribes, at least that you would think at the time, would hardly ever get together. But the purpose of this gathering was like a 3-day gathering. And I got like maybe an hour and a half recording of it. Their conversations, even though a lot of them were speaking in the language, they were using sign talk. It was real basic. It was like, it's good to see you, like they would talk about eating. They would talk about traveling. It was just a real common language there, but they all understood each other. Completely different linguistic stocks, right? And so, and I was always like amazed by that. So like even amongst the Oceti Shakoi, the Dakota, and even the Assiniboine Nakota, like it was common for them to like go like this and then give like a band sign to describe their band. Maybe if they were Ogallala, they might go like this and then go like that, right? Assiniboines, in that video, they were doing the same thing. The individual, the Dakota from Poplar, they'd make that sign to introduce themselves. And so I was really kind of amazed by that. And there was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's a term for some of the Anishinaabe people that went onto the plains up in Canada. Is it Soto? Yeah, there was an individual that was a part of that. He was represented in this video. Again, short little clips, but super educational. So I know Anishinaabe people, at least the ones on the plains, had sign talk. What's your understanding of sign talk? Because there's different types. There's like the way that we, maybe through like total physical response, like every fluent speaker I've ever talked to, very few of them are just like always head down. They're animate. They're talking with their hands usually. It might not be true sign talk, but they're reinforcing it with their body and their hands. But there was also sign talk because they had to like exchange and talk. So, and when I posted this video, I put it on social media. It was like 2018, 19. But I had like fluent speakers that were Kiowa. Somehow, because it kind of like my only little post that ever went viral in my life. but it was cool because like all these people were just fascinated by it. They were like, and not even just the sign talk, but like she was an Assiniboine speaker, but like there was Lakotas. So like I understand that Kushi perfectly. How she would fit well in our community. I was reading all this stuff, and then like, but there was this talking with the hand. There's another Kiowa speaker. I picked up his book here last summer. It was him or his wife reached out to her, sent a message, was like, my husband's a fluent sign speaker in Comanche or Kiowa from down in Oklahoma. Yeah, talking with the hands. This guy, his wife reached out, was like, yeah, my husband understood everything that this Kushi said. Doesn't speak the language, has completely different language, and that was, they were just the geographic separation was, and the time, all this time got by, but because he was familiar with sign talk, I was just amazed by it. I thought that was like super cool. I guess so. What is your understanding of sign talk in Anishinaabe? Is it a thing still? Did it go away? Yeah, just any of your thoughts on that would be cool.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah,
so cool. Yes, there was widely understood Ojibwe talking with hands, and I think it is primarily a thing of the past. Yeah, the Ojibwe were really at the center of the Great Lakes and also in the center of the fur trade, even prior to the arrival of French people and like the transatlantic fur trades and stuff like that. So a lot of people learned Ojibwe just because they're kind of like, Germany in the middle of Europe. Everybody's bumping into them. And, once the French had established a relationship with the Ojibwe at the beginning of the European fur trade, then they're kind of at the center of that. And so I think there's, a lot of the historical references, like there's so many different books in Jesuit relations, like these early French writings, 76 volumes of what they wrote. And they mentioned the use of sign and communication and stuff like that. And then, there's more to learn. And we, a lot of people who were even doing some sort of linguistic inquiry, they were interested in like getting the Bible into native languages and a little bit less interested in like recording for posterity, whatever these people are up to. So there probably were some regional variations, and it probably was widespread across the Great Lakes and the plains. But the usage of that, like as a formalized system, I think really faded out, at least at the beginning of the reservation period. But these other cultural dimensions that you speak to, like gesturing and talking with hands, and, I think that's something, first of all humans do. And I know that like some things in Ojibwe don't translate well. Like we have what they'd call a preverb, iji. And it's like, you look it up in a dictionary and they'll say thusly. Well, what the heck does that mean, really? And what it really is a way of establishing a context. So wisini would mean somebody eats. Iji wisini would be someone eats in a certain way. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means when you're gesturing with your hands, gi iji wisini, and they would be describing fast or slower, even though there are other words you can use to describe those things too. And so it's setting up a context for use with gestures. And so it's built right in to linguistic language, as well as just the way people naturally communicate with one another. So I do think it's a real thing. And I think you can see at least some carryover in just the way people carry themselves and communicate, even though I would say I have not run into people who were well-versed in the traditional, like formal system of talking with their hands. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't want to go over all of our content. Otherwise people ain't going to show up at our event tonight here. So, but we do have, by the time people probably hear this recording, it'll be after the presentation, but it's all good. But we do have, how many books did you have published? You have, because I went to your AntonTreuer.com. I seen there was like 15, 20 books, but
yeah,
we do have three or four different books: Cultural Toolbox, Language Warrior Manifesto. For some reason, I only got one copy. I ordered 4. Must have got hung up in delivery someplace. Living Our Language. And then I have the audio book. I haven't listened to all of it, Where Wolves Don't Die. I guess any of those, like, let's say like there's an aspiring, I kind of already have my opinion, but like, because I've already read the Language Warrior Manifesto, but like, if you were going to direct or guide someone that is wanting to pick up the language, right? Maybe bumping into a little bit of, because I see this happen a lot, like with students at the tribal college that I'm at, and a couple other spaces that I operate in. there's I think at the core that suppresses, I think our development is like identity issues. Sometimes we don't feel like we're like, who am I, to like learn the language, or that we're just like laterally oppressing each other for some whatever reason. So like we don't like put our everything behind our engagement and learning cultural things. So like, where do you recommend, like, because I haven't read the Cultural Toolbox, like which one of your works are you, I guess, most proud of, or would you recommend to get someone started as like an adult, maybe a tribal college student, to kind of get them some foundational direction for learning a language or culture?
I mean, first of all, I love them all. They're all different. And so I would say this, like, really what one person needs might be a little different from someone else. I can give you a one sentence rundown on a couple of them. Sure. But I wrote the Language Warriors Manifesto, how to keep our languages alive no matter the odds, to share a little story about my own language learning and sharing journey in one part, and to share about a collective one, how we started building immersion schools, scaling things up, developing tools, resources. And we're doing both ancient things, in a ceremonial context, and modern things, like we just did an Ojibwe dub of Star Wars. We've developed Rosetta Stone for the Ojibwe language, and lots of other things too. So it'll give people a sense for, here's what's happening with indigenous languages. Here's why indigenous languages matter. Here's how an individual can learn their language. Here's how a group of people can scale that up and do something big in your own community. So if you're interested in the language stuff, that's a good one for that. The Cultural Toolbox, Traditional Ojibwe Living in the Modern World, is more a deeper dive into Ojibwe culture. There are some dimensions of culture we do not put in a book, so it's not like how to do a ceremony or something like that, but it's really a story about how our family lives our ancient culture in a modern time. And so even like what I described about birthing practices or the maple sugar harvest or things like that would be in there. If somebody wants to go a little deeper than the surface level, be proud to be Native without anyone telling you what it means to be Native, that one might be helpful there. If someone relates to the world through story, then Where Wolves Don't Die is for you. It's a work of fiction, but it's a window into our culture. And I think I've kind of had a love-hate relationship with indigenous lit. For starters, most of the books written about natives are written by non-natives who'd never talked to one of us until just a few decades ago. You'd only have a couple people like a Vine Deloria Jr. doing something, even in the 60s or 70s. But that's changing rapidly now. Even now, though, a lot of our stories are about characters who lament the culture they never had because residential boarding schools, stories of trauma and tragedy. And I wanted to not shy away from or forget to acknowledge the bad things that have happened to us, but I wanted to take us to a different place. Story about a boy dealing with life, and, in a story full of tension, keeps turning pages, that takes you to a different place. What would healing look like? What would healthy masculinity look like? We do a lot of talking about the unhealthy stuff without showing people something healthy. So this boy's, he's kind of looking for clues to a murder, but finding himself in the process, gets sent to run a trap line with his grandfather in the Canadian wilderness. And so it gives you a window into the culture without it being like explicating, like, here's what we do for this, here's what we do for that. It's just, here's a kid coming of age in his own culture. Other ones, the Living Our Language is really a collection of stories by elders recorded in our language and then translated into English. So it's both Ojibwe and English in there. And I've got other books too, Everything You Wanted to Know About Indians, But Were Afraid to Ask, which I was originally thinking of like all the non-native people who need a place to start. But a lot of Native people, I really love that book too, because we get bombarded by all the questions. And I mean, I always knew what it was like living in my body in my point in time in my part of the world. But even my mom, who became a tribal judge, like, I still couldn't have explained tribal sovereignty to you by the time I'd finished high school, or so many other things. And there are lots of other ones too. So lots to pick from. I'm a native dude, but I got a German-sounding last name, Treuer, Treuer, because I got a non-native dad. But do a little Google search for my name, and you'll see the website and lots of free tools and resources, and a YouTube channel with lots of videos too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely have been, the last few months I followed him on I think Instagram, and he's on all the major social media platforms. I believe he's on there. So yeah, definitely check him out, learn a lot. But yeah, and then anyone that's listened to our this podcast series, I guess as a reminder, part of the reason that we do this is because land-based education, we want to recenter that as far as a focal point for students to get reconnected to their identity, their culture. We believe there's a lot of healing in that, and it also has a lot of forms, and that's why, like, anytime there's someone a guest that is able to come into our community, and even all the different types of individuals that we have here in Fort Peck and the surrounding communities, anytime we can bring them in and share their voice, that's another perspective that we can all learn and grow from it, because land-based education has so many different like applications, whether it's like literally hands-on art forms. We've had guests we talk about on that. We do cultural arts workshops where Tahanshi over here is rocking that brand new Cho bracelet, man. He's just been wearing it every day, so he has that bling and it kind of shines in the
copper,
light.
baby.
Heck yeah, man. But like even with that, for example, we had a lot of times people think, well, that's just the Southwest. Well, it's like, yeah, but like in the Southwest, Navajo, Pueblo people, the Mexican peso, they took that and melted it, and then they stamped it. They indigenized it, right? And so that's awesome. That's cool. So we can do that too. Even like Great Lakes or Plains tribes, we could take that medium in the art, and it doesn't have to just be like a relic of the past. We can indigenize things and put our own like style into this medium and make it like a cool thing. That's how our languages and our culture can live and project in a new way. And I always thought that was really cool. So like Tanshi Jeremy kind of explained that. And so things like that, I try to give voice to artists and to share those types of things, because I think there's so many different ways that it can go. And next week we have some sixth graders coming from Wolf Point. I don't know what the weather is going to be like, but we wanted to share that growing dome, kind of show them how we're kind of like down our plans for having like medicinal plants and herbs and things being kind of, and we can do things like put the indigenous language for maybe both tribes here in Fort Peck, but also the scientific name. And then those are all things that I think we need to we could get better at here, embracing like STEM with indigenous like ways of knowing and being, and really trying to promote that. And this, our little way of contributing, at least what I'm trying to do with some of the grant work that we do, is putting it out there, because we don't even necessarily have to like create new contents. Like we're doing like a lot of cool stuff, but we never really reflect on it. That's one thing I've noticed is like, because I'm learning, Tanshi Cole's learning, we might as well learn and share different things with everybody, and then hopefully people can kind of learn with us and kind of grow with us. That's kind of the point. And hopefully everybody had something that they took away from this in a good way. So I'm gonna Henak Chado. Any other comments, questions?
No, thanks a lot for having me today and being such a gracious host for my time in your community. Thanks for listening, everyone, today, and look forward to keeping in touch. Miigwech.
Pidamaya pedo, doksta kewa chia kapik tedo.